G'day everyone and welcome to the GameDay Squad Aussie Rules Fantasy Show. I'm Pitty and alongside Haz and Dill, we are the Aussie Rules Fantasy Bros. We've partnered with GameDay Squad to bring you everything you need to know this season to succeed in GDS Aussie Rules. And to help me preview everything we need to know for round 6, I'll be joined by Ross from Third Man Up and the Supercoach Swordplay channel. Roscoe, how you going, mate? And thanks for joining the show.
Nah, no worries, Pitty. Very excited to be here. Been watching every week, so it's good to finally be on.
Yeah, and thanks for watching and all your support as well to our channel, as well as all our viewers every single week that join us. And I know they're going to benefit from the input and the insights you'll have this episode. So we're stoked to have you along, mate. And again, as always, for our viewers and listeners, just make sure you guys have subscribed to all our Fantasy Bros socials so that you don't miss a thing this season. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TikTok, Facebook, and Insta. Just make sure you search at Fantasy Bros AU. And if you're a new coach, make sure you put in that code there on screen, FBAR26. That will get you 3 9-player combo packs to get you started, particularly for that Contender competition. And it's never too late to get started in GameDay Squad. Now, Roscoe, mate, let's kick off the episode. Let's look back to round 5, gather round. How did you go? And more importantly, are you through in the cup?
Yes, absolutely through in the cup. So very pleased with that, locking up the All-Star for round 4. So definitely pretty chuffed with that. I didn't have an amazing week otherwise. It was a bit of a nervous wait. I think I was 41st in Classic. Best finish for the week was actually 17th in the FantasyBros Sunday Showdown. So I did all right there. A couple of
Nice
pods missing that I know you had there. Obviously, I'll let you talk about that one. But pretty decent week otherwise. I think I was between 20th and 40th in all the comps, so pretty consistent. I try and build the same squad across the standard competitions. So, I had a couple of good gets there. I know Bailey Smith was one that I was very keen to max rarity out on across all the comps, and he obviously went very well with a 160. Yep. Cozzy Pickett was another one, and he got 150 in the forward line as well. I think got a bit stung, though, by Dane Zorko, as I'm sure a lot of coaches did. I had his all-star in 2 comps and only 54 going off injured with the calf, so a bit disappointing there.
Yeah, and that's tough too. I think Zorko was probably the one that most people would have had as well, and I think it would have then come down to the question of how much salary did everyone put on him. I think I played his Platinum in Classic as well, so when you load up like that and they go down, it absolutely stings, hey?
Yeah.
It's good, hey, getting through in the cup, that's all we need. I know we were talking over the weekend, you and Janeth got through, which is really good, and Haz and I got through too, which is really nice.
We avoided each other this week as well, which is good.
Yeah, that's what matters, hey. And you alluded to it before, like very nice for me on screen there, finishing top of the leaderboard for the Sunday Showdown. So I've booked my place there in the playoff series at the end of the season. So I'm absolutely stoked about that. I've actually really enjoyed that Sunday competition. I love the strategy that's involved, and you've got to think about every single selection, and you've got to really think about who you're putting your salary on. And I've had a little strategy I mentioned about a couple episodes ago, and it paid off in this one. So I was really stoked with that. And the player you're probably alluding to there in Cal Wilkie, one of your boys, I just thought, I've got his diamond. I was like, I'm mad if I don't play this. So I just put it in and I locked that in pretty quick. And then I thought I need to get salary on everyone else. So Sinclair, Ash, Witt, all those guys that could go off. I was like, I need to have salary on them. And I just got to hope that Wilkie rides me home. And obviously a few good pods as well. I didn't have a Sam Flanders. I didn't even realize till the game started that I didn't have Sam Flanders. I was like, geez, he's on 45 at quarter time and I don't have him. I think I'm in trouble here.
Yeah.
But I had Brad Hill. So he actually came home quite strong for me, which is really handy. And obviously Nick Madden in the ruck. So you could call it kissed or you could call it good coaching. I don't know which one it is, but I'm through. So I'm stoked with that. And then like outside of that, pretty good as well. I was just outside top 20 in Classic. So it was good enough to get me through to the next round in the Cup, and then 10th in Challenger was my next best finish too. And you can sort of see on screen there, the best finish for Haz there was 7th in the under-22s. But again, he came home in a nail-biting finish against Jay Mayhem in the Cup. So he won by 18 points in the end. And he was stressing. Yeah, he was stressing all weekend. He said, I don't think I've done enough. I've missed an Archie Roberts, for example, who goes 199. But he came home in the end. So, yeah, he was stoked with that. And then in terms of our stars and our scars, we'll jump on there as well and have a look. Oh, actually, sorry, before I do, the other thing I want to mention, I said at the top, Dill is joining us for the Aussie Rules Fantasy Bros. He was in the chat there too. Let me pull his comment up. Where'd he go? There he is. He's currently, so he finished first. He took out the starter competition on the weekend, which he's excited about. He also came third in Contender. So he had the Archie Roberts. He had a few players that just went absolutely bananas for him. Just nailed all his picks, which is awesome. And he's currently leading the starter seasonal rankings as well. So shout out to Dill there, absolutely killing it. But mate, do you want to kick us off? Who is your star and who's your scar from last round?
For me, I think it probably has to be Bailey Smith as the star. All-Star was very big in Classic, getting me through the Cup. And then I think, as I touched on before, probably Dane Zorko. Maybe if I had to find another one that's not injury-related, I was very disappointed with Will Ashcroft in the standard competitions. I just thought against North Melbourne, Dunkley and Neal have been a bit out of form. I thought it was, the right game for Ashcroft to maybe be a standard play, but only the 80 or so, which was decent enough for the 22s, but a bit of a killer in the standard competitions.
Yeah, he could do that sometimes, can't he? There's just some games where he just doesn't turn up for, and some of those bigger ones where you think, or you might not think too much about him, he'll just pop up and have a really good score. So I find him tricky to play, absolutely. And then for us, probably the big ones, Josh Dacos, 89. Like, that's not enough. Yeah. That's not going to get the job done. Luckily, again, we weren't keen on playing the two pies. It was going to be one, and we went with Josh Dacos. So, yeah, Houston with another poor score. Well, not another poor score, with a poor score, sorry. But yeah, Dacos just not enough. And Caleb Sarong, the 1 week we go to play him, and he just does that to us. He was tracking really well at halftime, and then, still finished under 198. That's just not enough in that midfield line, especially when there's players just putting up some monster scores. So, yeah, that they were probably the ones that really hurt us, and there's probably others for everyone else too. Get your star and your scar in now there in the chat, because I think Sean Mannon's probably another one. I was keen on him as a bit of a pod this week, and just he's out of form, isn't he?
Yeah.
I'm not sure he'll be in the side. He could be running around in the twos potentially. But yeah, how good is Wang as well? Coming home on Sunday, 170 GDS points. That was incredible. I do feel for anyone that might have faded him or just not picked him in general. You might not have intentionally gone out of your way to leave him out of your side, but you might have had some other matchups you liked instead, like a Tom Stewart, for example. But a 170 from Nazai Wanganeen-Miller, that was just, so good to see. I reckon he's the best player in the game to watch at full flight. He's just so good. And then Josh Rochelle there too, as another star, which is
both unreal performances.
So good. We've got a heap of people in the chat as well. We've got Silver Pigeon in there as well. Looking forward to all the pods. There are some great ones here, mate. We've got heaps to get through here tonight. And we've got Nate Daddies again as well. Trust the Brevs. Absolutely. We've got Oscar on tonight as well. Trust him. And Arnie Booger in the chat as well. Again, g'day, Arnie Booger. Heaps of people in there ready to go for a big weekend of footy. And speaking of that big weekend, round 6, again, another full 18 squads available at our selection here. And in terms of these matchups, we've got 3 games for that primetime competition. So we've got 1 game on the Thursday night, which is the Pies and the Blues at the MCG. And then we have 2 games on the Friday night, that doubleheader, that sort of crossover, unfortunately. So we've got the Cats up against the Dogs at GMHBA and the Swans up against the Giants. Battle of the Bridge. That will be a cracking contest. I reckon. I'm keen for that one.
2 very interesting matchups there on the Friday.
Yeah, there are, aren't they? And it's going to be interesting when we put that team together, because there's lots of really fantasy relevant players. So I think primetime will be very interesting this week. The Saturday the Saturday games, we've got obviously the Suns up against the Bombers at People First. We've got the Hawks up against the Power, and we've got the Crows against the Saints at Adelaide Oval. Mate, your boys, do they ever play in Melbourne?
I think I was saying this morning on our other video. It seems like we're always on the move, but I think the next couple of weeks we do have a bit of a run at Marvel. Then I think after the bye, we've only got 1 game that's interstate, so pretty lucky there.
I feel like that happens most times. I feel like last year they had a really big run of like 9 games or something at Marvel.
Yeah, I don't know who does the fixturing. Maybe ChatGPT.
And you can see on Sunday there for our FantasyBros Sunday Showdown competition, we've got the 3 games. I like having the 6 teams to choose from. I really enjoyed that last week when building my squad, and I've been enjoying that again this week. So we've got the Roos up against the Tigers. We've got the Demons up against the Lions at the MCG. That'll be a cracking game too. And we've got the Eagles and the Dockers as well to finish the round. That'll be another great derby, hopefully, for us to finish the round on. Have you got any thoughts, Roscoe, before we move on and start previewing our defenders?
No, look, I think it's a very interesting round. There's some matchups that on paper look like they could be very targetable, but at the same time, a lot of these, maybe plug and plays that don't have such great matchups. I'm looking at Sydney and GWS. I'm looking at Geelong and the Bulldogs playing each other. You know, going to be an interesting round.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think trying to find the balance of the players you're locking in and the pods you're going forward too. I think trying to get that balance right will be interesting this week too. So let's launch into it, mate. Let's start previewing our defenders. There's heaps to talk about here. In terms of our plug and plays, probably the big thing to note there is that Dane Zorko is injured, as we spoke about there at the start. He's got that calf injury. He'll be out for 2 to 3 weeks, so you can't be playing him in your squads. We've obviously got Rosie still injured, and yeah, we had a pretty set and forget backline to begin the year, and now we're really having to look at a few options to round it out. I still think you can go Sinclair, Ash, Witt, and Nazaya Wanganeen Nilera as well as your 4 plug and plays, and you can be pretty confident with what they're going to do each week.
Yeah.
But I know we were having a bit of a discussion beforehand about the Giants boys coming up against the Swans as well. I was speaking about how there's a couple concerns I've got. They're not as easily locked into my side this week as what they normally are. And I think it's a scary decision to not include them. But have you had any thoughts about the 2 Giants boys in particular this week? I'm keen to see what you're thinking. Have you locked them in without thinking, or have you got any other ideas?
Currently, I have, but I am slightly concerned about James Jordan potentially going to one of them. I have a bit of a conundrum where I don't know if it's going to be Callahan that James Jordan's going to go with. And that sort of leaves me thinking, do I want to leave one out in case it's the other one that gets tagged, or do we just pick both, right? I think that's the safest way. Still thinking that, James Jordan's going to go to one of them. You can't risk leaving one out or both. So I think we might have to play both. Maybe if you're worried about that, maybe you go on a lower rarity. But at the moment, it hasn't really affected how I would normally play them.
Yeah. And Dean Cox kind of came out. I watched some media he did as well recently. He came out and said that he was asked about James Jordan going to Finn Callahan because he did that last time, but Finn Callahan still scored quite well. And Coxie kind of came out and said, like, yeah, he probably can, but he can also go forward of the ball as well, and he can play a role on one of their defenders. And he didn't allude to it. He said he's done a job on Whitfield in the past, but he said we'll play him where needed. And he said the good thing about JJ is that he can swap mid-game. Like if someone's getting off the chain and we need to quell someone's influence, like we'll just move him across. So he did kind of flag that, and it's one where it's got me thinking. And I think the safe play is just play them both and play low rarity.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of options I really like this week. So I'm finding it a bit of a dilemma. So in terms of our 3 options for round 6, we've got Archie Roberts there on screen, who's just absolutely forced his way into our sides probably. We've got Colby McKercher and Tom Stewart. There are a few players we picked out this week in particular. Out of those 3, mate, or you can throw somebody else in there that's not on screen if you want, completely up to you. Who would you like to start talking about in particular? Who's caught your fancy when building your squad this week?
I think at the moment, the one of those 3 up the top there that is in my squad is Archie Roberts. I think the Gold Coast matchup is not a disadvantage for him for the season. He's gone 199, 166, 100, 107, and 72. But I think in the last 2 weeks, we've really seen the game plan maybe change a little bit for Brad Scott. And I think his role sort of changes well. They are the 8th easiest matchup to Suns, but I think what's really selling me on Roberts is his handball receives and his kick-ins. I believe off the top of my head, I think he had 13 handball receives in that last game for his 42 disposals, and he also took 9 kick-ins as well, which are obviously 2 big things that we want defenders to be having in GameDay Squad. The kick-in normally leads to another possession as well. He runs around, maybe takes another mark, maybe kicks it again. It's just fantasy gold. And I think that he's probably one that sits in that 5 to 7 range that I'd be pretty happy to play.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that you mentioned that too about the handball receives and the kick-ins. And I think that he's one where they're happy for the ball being in his hands and they actually look for that. And I think maybe they don't trust their ball movement as much as well. So they're happy to sort of kick it sideways to him or go back to him to get the ball into his hands so they can then go forward. So he's just like, even the amount of kicks he's had in the past few weeks has just been absolutely insane. So yeah, he's one that I felt I didn't want to play this week because I'm like, surely he can't just go nuclear again for a 3rd week in a row. And I'm probably not expecting that either. Like I'm not expecting another 160 to 190 somewhere around there. But he should still be really good. He should still put up a really good score.
Yeah, and I think I actually read on Twitter today that there was no Jackson Pryor at Essendon training today. He's sort of one of the other ones that's been taking a bit of the defensive distribution for Essendon. So I think if Pryor misses out, then I think that's probably just another slight tick in Archie Roberts' favour.
Yeah, absolutely. They've all sort of been scoring quite well together too.
Yeah.
Sorry, in that back line. But even in the last 2 games, he's had 32. Sorry, mate, something in my throat. 32 and 29 kicks in the past 2 games, which is absolutely crazy. Getting 4 points for every kick as well. That's just a massive score that he's putting up. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty happy to lock him in my side, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're both pretty keen to have him there. Colby
Yeah.
McKercher, I think, is a bit of an interesting one.
Mm.
Playing with that Richmond matchup at home.
Yep.
Probably a lot of coaches will be trying to target North Melbourne this week, given that. He has sort of been a bit here, there, and everywhere. He started slow in the season, sort of
Yep.
coming back from a preseason injury. He scored 46 and 79, but then he put up a 139, 103 on Good Friday, which I think he was on about 70 at halftime, and then just a 94 against the Lions in gather round. But he
Yep.
did take 9 kick-ins as well. And looking at his heat map, all of his possessions were in the back half. So
Yep.
I think that indicates to me that they're not really throwing him in the midfield as much. So I feel like he's a bit more pottish perhaps than Roberts, but
Yeah.
I can see good reasons to have him in there, if he's playing defensively, especially against Richmond.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even in terms of how popular he is, it's actually Caleb Daniel that's ahead of him in terms of the coaches and who they're liking from North Melbourne. Caleb Daniel's the 12th most popular defender when building those standing competition sides this week. Colby's the 16th most popular, sitting at 12.3% in squad. So he is a bit more of a pod, and it's probably one of my dilemmas this week. I've got a lot of matchups I really like, and I think the safe option is to go an Ash and a Wit and play low rarity, and it means I've got to leave some of these guys out. So it could be a Colby. I just go, well, he's more of the pod, so I might leave him out. But that Richmond matchup, I think it just could be juicy. Like in terms of that role, it's still there, like you said, taking those kick-ins, and he's playing in that back half. And I don't expect that to change this week. But even in terms of what he's done against Richmond in the past, they're actually his second favourite matchup across his career, and he's hit GDS scores of 113, 122, and 119 in his last 3 against them. So he's a player that he's got those pig tendencies, and I think when he comes up against a team that he knows he's got the wood over, like he'll just feast. So he's one that I'm just very tempted to play this week, and I know he's a bit more of a pod, but I'm finding it really hard to leave him out of my side, unfortunately.
Yeah. I don't think he's in there for me at the moment. There might be
Yep.
just a couple ahead of him. We'll sort of mention them when we get to the pods. But I
Yeah, for
think
sure.
there's definitely valid reasons for McKercher to be in there. Now, Tom Stewart is an interesting one because he sort of started the season really, really well, but then he's dropped to 62 last round. I mean, there's a lot of things to consider. They are playing the Dogs, who are absolutely leaking points at the moment to defenders. They're the second easiest matchup. But the Norwood factor, is there much to take out of the fact that that game was at Norwood, and perhaps that impacted his scoring a little bit with it being a smaller, narrow ground?
Yeah, I think there probably might be. I think the other big thing as well that probably went against him a bit. So one was the Norwood factor, but 2 was obviously the change they had in their side with Holmes going back behind the footy too. I think that they want the ball in Holmes' hands and the run that he provides, and also his kicking. So I think that probably took a bit. I think the Norwood factor took a bit. And I just feel like even the West Coast Eagles, to an extent, maybe took a bit as well. They're not a great matchup for opposition defenders. Like in terms of the Eagles, there, where are they sitting there? Sort of, there you go, the 6th or equal 5th hardest matchup there for opposition defenders. So they're not great, and I just feel like he might have even taken the foot off the pedal a little bit in that matchup too. This week, my question is, will Holmes continue to play behind the footy, or the 3 players, so it was Blitzarves, Henry, Jack Henry, and Jack Martin, will they all come back in? They were all managed. So I just wonder what we saw last week, could that actually just go back to what they have been doing for the whole season? Was that just a 1 week off, or will Holmes stay behind the ball? And I think if Holmes does stay behind the ball, do you reckon there's a chance that it could be Holmes that scores really well, but it could be Stewart, and it could be a couple others like a Zach Guthrie or a Lawson Humphreys, for example? Like, could there be multiple Geelong defenders that still score well?
Yeah, I think so. I think with the Dogs, they're not particularly restrictive at all. I just suppose we want to see team lineups and see what they sort of come out with, as you say.
Yeah.
It depends. I know where they get named on the team sheet is not necessarily where they always play, but if you see Max Holmes named on ball, you see Tom Stewart named back, then maybe Holmes isn't going to go back.
Yeah, something to keep an
It all
eye on. But
depends.
in terms of those defenders too, like why I think even if Holmes is behind the ball, maybe you could still look at a Tom Stewart is just looking at the scores that the Dogs have allowed. Like even last week for the Hawks, it was Hardwick, Sicily, Battle, Impey, and Amon that all went over 100. So they had 146, 135, 123, 114, 103. The week before, it was the Bombers. It was Roberts, Farrow, Reed, Pryor, Johnson, and McGrath. They had 166, 116, 115, 99, 99, 92. Like there's just points everywhere. And that's why I kind of go, well, even if Holmes is still back, I kind of still like Tom Stewart. And, looking at what he's done to start the year, like before that 62, he's had 115, 136, 130, and 92. I kind of look at it and go, I'm actually really tempted by this.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting one. There's lots to come up with Tom Stewart, I think, where he plays. But, I mean, if he goes back to the role that he's been playing and Holmes is in the midfield, I don't see a reason why we can't play him because his scoring has been very good. I mean, he went, 115, 136, and 130 the 3 games before last week. So definitely no knocks there.
He's
now
scored well.
Yeah.
Scored well against them too in the past, just mind you. So his last 3 scores, 111, 159, and 99 too. So can score against them. And he's one that has tempted me into playing him, that's for sure. But go on, hit me with your pods, mate. I know that you've got a few there as well. I've got 2 on screen.
Yes.
Where do you want to start?
I think one, which is a big point of difference, which I'm actually quite keen to play this week, is Josh Worrell versus St Kilda. Yeah. I think last week, weather-wise on the Thursday night, wasn't favourable for him. It was a wet game. They weren't able to really cleanly distribute the ball. St Kilda are a very, very good matchup for defenders. We saw what Port's defenders just did against them Sunday. We had the likes of Logan Evans. We had Farrell. All scored pretty well. So I think Josh Worrell is one that I'm pretty keen to be with this week, coming up against that St Kilda matchup. The other one I have is Luke Ryan versus the West Coast Eagles. I think he took a majority of the kick-ins, looked really good playing against Collingwood in gather round, did play defensively accountable, and then, was also able to rebound off and get a couple of cheap possessions as well. I'm hoping, with that Freo game that perhaps they can get the edge over West Coast early on, and then the second half can maybe become a bit of a, a training drill chip mark. And, that's when Luke Ryan really thrives. So those are my 2 that aren't there. But we're also very curious to go through the 2 that are there. So if you want to take us through Nick Newman, I'd be very interested to hear your case for him.
Yeah, I'm very excited about Nick Newman. I'm very excited for Kitty too. But just on those points too, I really like the Josh Worrell play. I didn't even end up looking into him too much, but up against St Kilda, they are the 3rd best matchup you can target for opposition defenders. And I really rate that pick. I played them once in the last year and he scored a 112. So I really like Josh Worrell, especially because he's looking like probably their best defender down there at the moment for the Crows. So I rate that. It's just the Luke Ryan one that scares me.
He's very up and down, but when he's up, they're really up.
Well, I had a look at the Eagles too because I was like, why didn't I look at Luke Ryan? And the Eagles are actually his worst matchup across his career. Like last 4, he's gone 60, 86, 76, 76. If that had been the other way around, I'd be tempted. But because he's shown that up and down nature in his game and he doesn't have great scoring against them in the past, I'm not going to go that way. But I could be very tempted into a Josh Worrell 100%. So I'm going to have a bit of a look at that as well afterwards because I don't mind that shout at all. But yeah, mate, Nick Newman, you mentioned there before about Luke Ryan playing against the Collingwood Magpies. They are a really good matchup for opposition defenders. They're the 2nd best. So they're allowing 92.9 points on average for opposition defenders. And Newman, he's obviously made that successful comeback to senior footy after that ACL injury and obviously some soft tissue concerns in the preseason. He's put up 2 scores so far, so 111 and 87. And a lot of coaches aren't going to be jumping on that because they were against the North and the Crows. So North Melbourne, they're the hardest matchup, like the number 1 hardest matchup for opposition defenders, and Adelaide are the 7th hardest. So two restrictive sides relatively in terms of those opposition defenders. So those 2 scores are actually not too bad given that's the case. And then Collingwood, obviously, we've spoken about how they are the best matchup, allowing 92.9 GDS points. So yeah, Luke Ryan, he scored 146 against them and 109 to Jordan Clark. The week before, it was Zorko and Kitty. They had 141 and 128. We also had Leicester and Wilmot. They still went over 100 as well. Wakefield and Ash, they went 151 and 122. Like, there's just points everywhere. They just allow points to those opposition defenders. So I really like the matchup from that sense this week. And this is where it gets really juicy, mate. And this is why I've locked him into a lot of my squads this week. They're his second favourite matchup across his career. And his last two against them was 170 and 174. And yes, they were. This is the thing that has raised, though. And Has is not as keen on a Newman as I am. But that was obviously before the ACL injury. That was 2024.
Yeah.
So how much do we read into that? I'm probably not picking him going, I'm getting a 170. I'm not expecting that. But I am expecting upside in his score. I'm sort of expecting, obviously, more than what he's put up so far this season, and we could see a nice pop score from him. That's what I'm hoping for. Yep. But to me, it's that role. It's that he's the designated ball user down back for Carlton. He's taking a large chunk of their kick-ins. He took 7 kick-ins last week for the Blues. He played on from all 7 of them. Florent took 3, followed by Boyd on 2. He's got the role, and he builds it off marks and kicks. So for me, I'm actually really keen to play this because I've spoken about this before. I need to start to look at, these players who might, give me that ceiling score and pop for me. So he's one I'm really keen to take a bit of a risk on this week.
Yeah, for sure. I think something I noted as well with Nick Newman, he's got a very high kick to handball ratio, which is something we always want from our defenders, especially in GDS.
Yep.
I think he went kick to handball ratio of 8 last week. So, if you can do that again and get 20 kicks, you're getting 20 points straight off the bat. So
that's Zorko-like.
Yeah, 100%. Makes it really easy to score compared to someone who handles a lot.
Yeah, exactly. There's a few players like that getting around. Someone to keep an eye on. There's a lot of defenders this week to be looking at, and maybe it's one of the other competitions you're not prioritizing as much, and you're going, who else am I going to put in? Maybe I chuck a Nick Newman in there and throw a bit of a dart, or maybe it's in your primetime team, for example. You look at locking in a Nick Newman potentially, but I think he could be quite good this week, or hoping at least with that matchup in particular. But yeah, Kitty as well. I think for me, this is the one, and I saw someone put this in here before. Let me pull it up as well. Where was it? It was from Nate Daddies. G'day, Nate Daddies. How are you, mate? So he says, get Wilmot in your squads, boys. I think you can get a few Lions in your squads this week. Maybe not all in your standard competitions, but in the Sunday competitions, my back line has a maroon, blue, and gold theme to it, that's for sure. And it's built around Kitty. So he scored a 69 last week against North. And as I said before, they're the number one hardest matchup for opposition defenders to start this season. And no Brisbane Lion defender went over 100. So I'm not reading into that too much. Before that, he had scores of 87, 66, 103, and 128. That was before the North game. So the 66, that was against Sydney. They're the third hardest matchup. And the 2 times were against the Saints and the Pies. So he's shown a bit of a trend this year of scoring really well against the good teams and then scoring quite poorly against those more restrictive matchups. But the big change for me, and this is why he's the pod, it comes down to the additional market share of points available down back with Zorko being ruled out through injury. The Lions will likely turn to Kitty as their main ball user down back because he's done it before and we know how good he is with that ball in hand, and he's actually now starting to build that base and he's looking pretty confident at the level again. And I think they're going to say, mate, you're our weapon off halfback and we want the ball in your hands. So they're up against the Demons. They're a positive matchup, 4th easiest for opposition defenders, allowing 89.1. Last week, Bombers went 166, 123, 118, 113, 102, and 101. That was Roberts, Ridley, Farrow, Ben Mackay, Jackson Pryor, and Zach. If Ben Mackay can turn up against the Demons, this is why I'm going. Now, I must also probably preface this, and I should say, this is a very spicy pick, and play with caution because he's going to be very lowly played by coaches. But yeah, if you are someone who does like to take a few risks, I think this one could really pay off. And again, probably for that Sunday competition, something to have a look at. And he's had decent scores against Melbourne in the past, but I think I'm probably not looking into that too much because for me, it's the fact that Zorko is not there and Kitty has that ability to show a ceiling score against those weaker teams.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if I'm brave enough. You do make a very good case for him, obviously being that Zorko possible replacement. But, there's just, I don't know, a lot of apprehension about it for me. Although fair play to anyone who ends up sticking him in because I'm sure it might actually go quite well.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I think I'm going to put him in my challenger side and we'll see there. I'm just outside the top 20 in Challenger 21. So I don't have a lot to lose, and I feel like I need to make up a little bit of ground, and I'm happy to sort of play a few pods there and have a bit of fun. So I think I'll throw one in and just see what he does. But yeah, definitely a risky one, but I thought a juicy one to flag with that change in role.
Yeah, for sure.
Have you got anyone else you want to mention just quickly too, mate?
No, I think I do
Worrell.
like the avoid on Jaden Short, obviously, with it being a tough matchup against North Melbourne. I like the primetime pod here, Lawson Humphreys, as we discussed with the Dogs. Colby McKercher, definitely going to be a Sunday superstar for us. And Connor O'Sullivan as well against the Bulldogs. I think all three of them are very valid plays in those comps.
Yeah.
A couple of other under 22s that I quite like from the defenders. I have here Jacob Farrow, obviously playing that role for Essendon. Think I'm going to be able to get my hands on a Jacob Farrow finally this week, as I need him. And Josh Lindsay as well, playing against Freo. I think him and Tom McCarthy are the two that have sort of been splitting the distribution. He had a shaky sort of first game, got dropped. But now I think he's sort of cemented his spot, and he's been pretty consistent, scoring between 70 and 80. So another pod there, Josh Lindsay in defence.
Yeah, I really like Josh Lindsay too as a player. He just looks really, cool, calm, collected, good ball user. I think he'll be a really good dynasty asset for our platform as well. And same with Jacob Farrow too. What rarity are you going to have on a Jacob Farrow? What have you been able to secure?
I think just going to be silvers for the two of them at the moment. Yeah,
I like that. They're looking
other
so
diamonds.
good off.
I probably want to play first.
Yeah, for sure. Now, mate, we might start moving on as well for that one. I might quickly flag too with Jaden Short as well. Just mention too why we're sort of thinking that. I actually found it really hard to pick a fade or an avoid, for the backline this week, and Jaden Short was the best I could do. So probably not expecting like a floor score. I'm not expecting a sort of 50 or 60, for example, but I'm just probably not expecting as much as what I am from other players. He hasn't gone below 100, so you can absolutely pick him for that reason alone, but he's regressed from the first couple of games where he scored 159 and 140. And obviously we've talked about North Melbourne being that really difficult matchup. So they're up against North Melbourne. They've also been the second worst matchup for him across his career. We saw no Lions defender go above not just 100, but they didn't go above an 80 at the weekend. So Fletcher was the highest, and we know he hasn't really been playing behind the ball. But yeah, I think the best score against them this year has been from Nick Newman with that 111. So I'm thinking in his last two, he's had 72 and 85. It's just not one for me that I'm going a Jaden Short this week. So if anyone's going, why is Jaden Short there? They're the reasons why I've got him as an avoid. But I'm not sort of expecting a really floor score. I just think there's probably other better options going around this week. But yeah, let's jump into the mids, mate. We'll have a bit of a look at who we're looking at there. So in terms of our three options at the top, and in fact, before we start there, our plug and plays, let's have a look. Still happy to roll out with our Dacos, Bontempelli, Bailey Smith, Max Holmes. And now we've got Jordan Dawson there, but if anyone hasn't been in the Discord or on the news recently, there's unfortunately there's a circumstance going on with Jordan Dawson. He may not be available potentially for the weekend, so keep an eye out for that. So don't plug and play him this week. Just see what's happening in that space. But I think the others, mate, we're happy to sort of lock and load, aren't we?
Yeah, I think so. I think Dacos versus Carlton. Bont versus Geelong might be a little bit of a trickier matchup, but it's the Bont. I don't know if we can ever truly leave him out. So, and Baz Smith and Max Holmes, yes, for me.
Yeah, especially with Holmes maybe behind the ball as well. But even on ball, I think he's unreal. I actually thought with that positional change this year in GDS, he wouldn't be as relevant to us every single week, but it's proved me wrong with that. He's just been an absolute lock and load every week so far this season. So for those watching along, we've got three options for round 6. Caleb Sarong, Isaac Heaney, and Luke Davies-Uniacke are our three options we think he'd be going with. And there's probably a couple others as well. There's a lot of midfielders to be talking about, but they're three that we've kind of picked out. Roscoe, I'm going to throw it to you. Would you like to start talking about one of those players, or have you got somebody else you want to throw up as well?
No, I think I'll go with Caleb Sarong. My mind is slowly being changed with him. I know a few in the community would notice that I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of these Freo midfielders, particularly Sarong, because he's just a bit of a burn man. But I think this week it might just be the perfect storm for him to put up a really nice score for us, even though I've said otherwise all week. Playing the Eagles, who are a very easy matchup for inside mids. A low score of 98 last week, but then before that, 145, 152, 78, and 131.
Yeah.
I don't think he'll get a tag this weekend. And he had a high rate, 88% of centre bounce attendances last round. But the one thing that does slightly concern me is Hayden Young potentially coming back into the side. I'm curious to see whether that takes Sarong out of the midfield mix a little bit, although I think at the end of the day, Young will probably end up playing managed minutes if he is back in. And I'm thinking Freo's midfield should get over the top of the Eagles, which I think makes Sarong a pretty fine selection for me at the moment.
Yeah, I like that call. That point you mentioned there too. I'm going to have to think about that as well, because that's a really big inclusion that could be coming back into that midfield mix. And I don't necessarily think that Sarong gets bumped out. I think he's clearly their number one mid. But what it might mean is that market share is distributed a little bit differently. We know they're not a hugely high fantasy scoring team, so I don't think that he'll get bumped out necessarily. But I think Hayden Young could easily, he could absolutely turn it on for the time that he's in there, and it's just the points that are normally there for Caleb Sarong are not there anymore. That would be my concern if he does come back in, Hayden Young, and I'm probably actually going to not play a Caleb Sarong. If that happens, I'm out straight away. I'm not playing him. I'm not going to take that risk. As you said, he can burn coaches. He's burned me. I don't think I ever get him right. So I'll be looking to play him in some comps for sure. And then if Hayden Young comes in, I'm out. I'm not going to play that game. If he goes big, fair play. But yeah, that's my only concern there. However, as you said, they're back at Optus Stadium, so I really like that. You talked about the matchup being really positive. We've had, Bailey Smith go 160. We know Holmes went 130 last week, but we also saw Tom Atkins go 142. And I think that there's probably a lot of similarities with Tom Atkins and a Caleb Sarong in terms of how they can build their score. Like they're really good at the coalface. So that probably speaks quite well. And Tanner Bruin as well had 138 too. So there's points going around for them, which is really good. And he's scored well on them in the past, 126, 118 and 120. So I think if you're keen on a Caleb Sarong, he should be a really good play. But that's my watch as well, absolutely, is that Hayden Young factor coming back in, even though he might have low tog, like you said, and get managed. Just for the time that he's in there, we know how good he can be, and he's a points per minute player too, Hayden Young. Like he can soak up a lot of those fantasy points in that short time he's on there, and I'm not keen to be part of that if that's the case. But Isaac Heaney, has he forced his way into your sides this week?
He's sitting there at the moment, but I think he's the one that I'm probably most apprehensive about. I think if he was playing against a much easier matchup, then yes, he'd be in there. And I know he's been kicking his 2-3 goals every week. He's just been elite, started this season off. But, against the Giants, I'm just a little bit worried. I know he's had 93% CBAs as well, although a minor thing to consider is Sheldrick potentially coming back in. I don't think Bedford has really been used in a tagging sense. I'm not too worried that way. But the first two scores were 81 and 115 for his season. But then obviously he's gone 150, 170 since then. I think he probably ends up somewhere closer to the first two scores for me. I don't know if he's going to be able to back it up 3 weeks in a row. And when you consider some of the easy matchups with some of the other midfielders, he's probably sitting in around that 7 to 9 option in my rankings at the moment, which I think he's still good enough. But I've got a lot to think about with him.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I get the same feeling. Can he do it a third week in a row? Can he go absolutely massive? And the thing that scares me is when everyone flocks to a player, I know what happens. They don't perform how they have done recently. So that does scare me a bit. It's probably the Giants factor as well. Like the Giants haven't been a great matchup for him in the past. If you look at how he's gone on his career, he's had some good scores in there, don't get me wrong. But they've been his third worst matchup across his career. So he hasn't scored as well on them as he has against the West Coast Eagles, for example. Or a Gold Coast Suns. But, in his last 2 games, he's had scores of 110, 99. He's had a big 154 in there 3 games ago, but then 97 and 116 before that. So some lower scores as well. 4 out of those 5 scores have been sort of that low ton, just under a ton. So I'm sort of thinking, he's probably a safe pick, just knowing everyone's going there and how good he could be, and he should give you that good score. But I'm not expecting that massive score. And with Dawson maybe being out now, I'm assuming he's going to be out. But if he is, I'm probably just going to throw a Heaney in just to be safe there, because I sort of think I know what I'm going to get from him, that's for sure.
For sure. I think, despite the matchup being tough, he's still a decent play for us this week.
Heaney.
Although it is pretty scary, when you look at the likes of Luke Davies-Uniacke, our other option up there, He's coming up against Richmond, playing at Marvel Stadium.
Oh yeah,
He's had some decent scores. 127 last week against Brisbane, 94, 141, 111. I think there's a few factors that also go in his favour. He's obviously high in the centre bounces for North Melbourne.
yeah,
No Sullivan again this week with the fractured jaw, which
that's
sort of
confirmed.
gives him a bit of a better, confirmed, a bit better
Yeah,
midfield, market share, as you've been talking about here. No tag coming his way, I think, against the Tigers. And the one that I found interesting when I was looking into his numbers is that he actually averages 31 disposals against Richmond, and they're his highest averaging opponent in his career. So, if he gets 31 disposals on the weekend, probably going to be a pretty decent score from him.
yeah, and it's the mark game for me. I think when he scored really well and hit that massive ceiling, he can get on the outside of the contest as well. Like he's not just winning it on the inside; he can get out and get his marks as well, which is just incredible. Did you find out his last three against them from GDS in there? Like you talked about the disposals, but have you seen his last three scores?
No, I haven't.
146, 111, and 183.
Yeah, okay.
Massive.
It's probably an average of, like 130 something. So, that's pretty
which is
decent.
absolutely. But the thing with LDU, you know what he can do. But I just think this one thing I saw last week was I should target the matchup. I had a few players that I sort of put in, was like, I think they should still be good for me, but I should have targeted the matchup more. I talked about Finn Callahan saying I really like that matchup for him, and I didn't go there. He goes 132. So I think this week I'm sort of keen on going, okay, lock away some of those plug and plays like we've got on screen, and then really go after the matchup for those last three and chase those ceiling scores. So I think LDU, he's one I haven't been keen on in the past, but I'm really keen on after going through all that data you just talked us through.
Yeah, I think he might have to end up in there for me. Maybe even replacing Heaney, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. Actually, the one thing I found, sorry too, mate, with that, it
That's all right.
really surprised me. The matchup data for Richmond's not as good as what we think. I was
No?
so surprised. No, I was so surprised by that. I actually went and had a look. So they are currently the seventh hardest matchup for opposition mids.
There you go.
That does not line up with my footy brain.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of picking this going off what we've seen him do on the Tigers in the past. And I feel like he's a bit of that, that confidence sort of player. If he comes up against a team that he knows he can do well against and he has done well against, I think he'll come out and bully them. So I'm pretty keen on picking him for what he's done on the past, even if the matchup data maybe doesn't suggest it to be as fruitful as what we're thinking. I found that really jarring. I thought, is that correct? But if you actually go back through, we had, Butters didn't do very well against them. Anderson didn't do very well against them. They're probably sitting in a different bracket altogether to an LDU for me, but it was just something that I thought was very interesting when looking through that data.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's interesting to me that they're the seventh hardest matchup.
Yeah. And
so
thanks to Stats Lab, obviously, unreal data there. But yeah, surprised me as well. Have you got Have you got another player you want to mention as well, or have you got a pod you want to throw up?
Yeah, look, I think another one that I'm quite interested in is Zach Merritt. I think he's actually a pretty decent fixture-proof option. I was talking about this on our potty this morning with DR. He is playing against the Gold Coast Suns. I think if there's a time you want to play the Gold Coast Suns, it's when Raul is still possibly, not fully fit yet. Petrarca might be playing a bit of midfield if he's in, still not fully fit. No Noah Anderson with the appendix. I think defensively they might be a bit more vulnerable. And the only sub 120 score we've had from Merritt this season was when he got locked down a little bit by Finn O'Sullivan. I'm not sure if he's going to get that sort of heavy attention from the Gold Coast. So I don't know if we can guarantee him a 120, but every other game he's gone that way. So, he seems to be really trying to drag Essendon over the line in a lot of these games this year, and I really like the pick.
Yeah. I like it. This is a good discussion point because I'm not as hot on Zach Merritt this week. I think he's a really good pick. And I think, we've had Dawson, obviously. We've talked about, what the uncertainty around him this weekend and the fact that I'm already going to probably have to change what I'm doing there and go to a Heaney. If there's anything else that happens across the weekend, I think I'm just going to turn to a Zach Merritt. I did that a couple of weeks ago in Challenger where we had some laid outs. It was Dacos and Ed Richards, for example. I turned to a Zach Merritt in one of my comps and he went 140 something. So he's such a consistent player. The only other thing I'll mention there too, like talking about those players and their fitness, Matty Rowell, that round 4, when he came back, he had 77% time on ground. He had a score of 43. centre bounce attendances 76%, whereas last week he put up a score of they were fantasy scores. Apologies, I didn't have the GDS scores there. They were fantasy points. But last week he goes over 100 and he puts up 90% time on ground with 96 centre bounce attendances. So he looked better. The data suggests that he got a bump in that. So he should be pretty right in terms of his fitness.
Yeah.
And they've obviously got Petrarca and Bailey Humphrey coming back in. So by all reports. So I think that like the Suns should actually be going pretty well, even if Noah Anderson is out. But the thing with Zachy Merritt too, like he's had some pretty good scores against him in the past. If they were playing at home, I'd probably have him on screen and locking him into a squad, because the 2 times they've played the Suns at home. He's put up scores of 158 and 170. In the 2 games they've played at People First most recently, he's put up 128 and 106. So to me, I thought if he's playing at home, I'm probably locking him in. If he's playing away, he's an option, but I'm probably not locking him in just yet. I'll chase a few other matchups first, and if there's a couple laid outs or a bit of carnage across the weekend, I'll probably turn to him. That's probably my view on a Zachy Merritt.
Yeah, interesting. I think for me, maybe I'm a little bit more confident, but I can see why you wouldn't be.
Well, he's just so reliant. It's probably not that I'm not confident, but I just think, again, chasing the sort of ceiling, for example, I've got a few other reasons for some other players personally that I'm keen to go for, but I think he should be a pretty good pick as well. What about a Finn Callaghan? We've mentioned the Giants already and the Swans, and the fact the Battle of the Bridge is going to be such a heated contest and a really interesting matchup. Dean Cox sort of suggested that obviously James Jordan did do a job on Finn Callaghan recently, but I sort of went in expecting Sydney not to be a good matchup for him, and I actually found the opposite. Sydney are actually Finn Callaghan's best matchup across the course of his career. And in terms of his previous scoring, he had scores of 118 and 138 against them, and he's averaging 117 against the Swans in his last 5. So although we might expect a tag, he actually has shown a really good ability to score against the Swans, and we've already hinted at the fact that James Jordan may not go to him. So what are your thoughts on a Callaghan? Are they much different to what I've sort of outlined there?
No, look, I mean, we understand that Sydney are a bit of a difficult matchup. If he gets the tag, he has broken it in the past. I just think for me, there might be better options. And for that reason, I probably won't be looking that way. Although, I mean, he has put up some nice scores against them in the past, and I can see why people would be swayed by that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, mate, let's jump into a couple of those pods as well. And then apologies too. I had that chat there as well. I'll get to some of those comments in the chat. I hadn't done that. Apologies. I'll get to a few of those there. Mel's just mentioned there too that Jordan Dawson won't be playing this weekend. Thanks, Mels, for joining that in. I appreciate that. So kicking off with those points of difference, mate. We've spoken about a Matty Rowell. Are you keen to lock him into your side?
Yeah, I think Matty Rowell will probably be in there at the moment. I think obviously 3rd game back, building fitness against Essendon, nice matchup. And Noah Anderson out means that the market share is probably still there for him. Pretty happy to have him in, I think, at the moment, especially when I actually looked at his score against the Swans and saw that he scored quite well. I thought, well, I didn't actually realize he went that well, which sort of made me think, maybe I do need to have him in.
Yeah, it's interesting. He looked really good. And I actually had him as an option at the top when I was sort of building this all out with Haz, and then I actually went and had a look. He's only played in currently 7.7% of squads, so he is a genuine point of difference this week, which could be scary or it could be excellent. Yeah. It's one that I'm pretty interested in personally. And I think that, I really love our grass-loving Brownlow medalist when he's at full flight. And as I said, I think that's really positive that he went up to 90% time on ground last week. He's a key cog in their centre bounces. Obviously, Noah Anderson's not there this week. They're actually a good matchup too, the Bombers we've spoken about. They're the best matchup for those opposition mids. They allow 102.1 GDS points on average. The Demons... Yeah, the Demons didn't do what I sort of expected. Like, yes, Cozzy put up a massive 150, but I think Cozzy's a very different player to a Matty Rowell. Cozzy pushes forward and hits the scoreboard. So I'm probably not looking at that 150 and going, oh, yeah, Matty Rowell will give us that. It's Jack Steele's 115 that I went, that's not sort of what I want to see. But obviously I expect this game to go out and pan out very differently to how that game panned out there as well.
Yes.
So, yeah, scored well on them in the past. He's had 136, 112, 136, and 121 in his last 4. That's an average of 126. So I think he's a genuine point of difference this week.
100%. Now, I think he
Yeah.
could be a genuine point of difference. I think another one could be Hugh McCluggage, as we've mentioned here. Now, there's a few things that do concern me about Hugh McCluggage, but there's a few things that for me also sort of lean me towards him more than any other Lions midfielder, if we would go that way. Obviously, an injured score of 22. Before that, he went 100. Last week, he jumped up to 56% of CBAs.
Yeah.
Sorry, not 56% TBAs, 56% time on ground, sorry.
Time on ground.
Yeah. So I think he should only improve on that again. Colton Tholstrup for the Ds is probably one of the main factors that sort of scares me about the Lions midfielders. But I was having a chat with DR this morning. He's a Lions man, and he thinks that Tholstrup is just about on lock to go to Lockie Neal. I think, with McCluggage being on these managed minutes, Dunkley being a bit out of form, I think he'll go to Lockie Neal, who's been the one that's sort of most in form. And I think for that reason, if we get Hugh McCluggage with 70 or 75% time on ground, he could be a decent option for us as a point of difference.
Yeah, he scored well on them in the past. That tag that you mentioned as well from Tolstrup, that's a really interesting one. I think I looked at that a couple of weeks ago. I thought, from the Bombers, who would you think, if he was going to do a job, which we sort of expect, which Bomber would he go to? You'd imagine it to be a Zach Barrett, wouldn't you? He still scored a 129. I didn't get to watch the full game there. Unfortunately, didn't get to.
Yeah, no, Darcy Parish went really well as well.
Yeah, so that was there. There was another game as well that I flagged that Tolstrup tag, and it didn't even eventuate, and I was a bit disappointed. I was just trying to double check which one it is. The Blues, Sammy Walsh. It didn't go to Sam Walsh. He scored 126. Yeah. So there's just been a few times where I've sort of thought, surely it's going to happen, and it doesn't. And then obviously if that tag does eventuate, I agree with DR. It's not going to go to McCluggage, particularly coming back off injury. I think if he starts to get a bit of form under his belt and they come up against it in the future, yes, probably. But I just think it's highly unlikely. And in terms of his recent scoring, he scores quite well against those two. You've mentioned a few of those Demons boys. The Bombers boys went well against them, and I had Darcy Parish there. His score of 119 in my notes. But it was, we had Merritt, Walsh, and Brayshaw, 129, 126, and 148. If you look at Clug in particular, they're his third best matchup across his career. And he's had scores of 121, 114, and 121 against them. Now, again, this is probably one of those ones that is a bit more out there. He's not going to be very popular in terms of his played percentages amongst the coaches. So I think, there's probably more risk associated with him than a Matty Rowell. But someone I'd flag in terms of there's a lot of boxes being ticked for this matchup in particular.
For sure. Now, I am very curious to hear your reasoning behind the avoid for Jack Steele. I don't think he's the worst player.
No,
he has
not.
Been scoring pretty well, but obviously an avoid here.
Yeah, no, and this sits in the same boat as that Jaden Short one. And actually, before I talk about that too, I apologise to those in the comments. I hadn't done that. I hadn't highlighted too many comments. I was in the wrong spot there, so I apologise. We had Arnie Booger had this great comment here about our defenders. Why don't we like Dacos or Short? Now, I did talk about Jaden Short and why. In terms of Josh Dacos, I just haven't loved his form, to be honest. I probably want to see a turnaround first. I think you can absolutely go there against Carlton. I think he's an option in your back line. He's just not what I'm keen on. I want to see something first from him before I go back and pick a Josh Dacos, but I still think he can. But in terms of Jaden Short, it's those things I talked about where I'm not expecting a massively high ceiling from him. It's the same thing for a Jack Steele. I just think with Jack Steele, they're coming up against the Brisbane Lions this week, and we know they're a bit more of a restrictive matchup for those opposition mids. And I genuinely do love watching Jack Steele play. So it does hurt me a bit to put him on screen and say that he's the avoid. But Brisbane, they're the second hardest matchup. They allow 81.5 GDS points on average to opposition mids. So they're just behind Sydney in terms of how difficult they are. And more importantly, Steele's averaging 101 GDS points against the Lions in his last three. He's had scores of 100, 119, and 84. And they're actually the third worst matchup for him across the course of his career, just because we know how strong a side they can be. And as I said, there's every chance Jack Steele still puts up a good score. We saw LDU do that last week against the Lions. He put up 127. But for me, there's just a few other boxes that aren't being ticked, and I just see less upside in a Jack Steele. And I found it really hard to pick an avoid, to pick a really genuine, clear avoid this week. in the midfield line. So he's probably unlucky and a bit stiff to be sitting there at the moment. But that's probably the reasoning for a Jack Steele there, mate.
Yeah, for sure. Now I do have one more avoid. It is from under
Hit me with it.
22s. I think we'll go through these here first. I think Matt Kennedy as a primetime pod is a very stellar choice. If we see no Richards and we see no Liberatore, a huge percentage of the Bulldogs' market share for the points goes through Matt Kennedy. And we saw what he did when Ed Richards was the laid out. He scored pretty well that game there. So pretty keen on Matt Kennedy there. Sarong we discussed as a Sunday superstar. I think he'll be in there for a lot of coaches. Under 22s, George Wardlaw was one that I had to watch. The other one I had was Xavier Lindsay, flagging that Rivers, Jath, and Salem are all out this week. And they were the other four that have sort of been defensively distributing the ball in terms of kick-ins. I just thought Lindsay's scoring hasn't been amazing, but I could see a little bit of an uptick with that. I know it's a trickier matchup against Brisbane, but if he is the one who the ball is going through in defence, I don't see a reason why we can't see a bit of a boost in scoring for him. However, since this morning when I recorded the other video, Melbourne announced that Xavier Taylor is going to be making his debut. So perhaps Xavier Taylor might actually cut into that a little bit, but I think Lindsay is still one to watch. Now, the avoid I wanted to discuss with you, I've had a few questions about it already this week, is in terms of Jagger Smith in our under 22 midfield.
Yes.
Now, for me, I think I've found no room for him, but it concerns me.
Yeah, it concerns me too, but I think there's reason to look at not playing him because his scores have been great in the past few weeks. And more importantly, I think the role is very different now. So Adam Cherry coming back in obviously has bumped him out and he's been spending more time off that half forward flank. So I think, absolutely. Ken has asked me the same question. Like, am I wrong for fading a Jagger Smith in under 22s? I'll have to build out my full squad first and have a look. So we'll see. But to me, if you can justify why you've picked each of the other players, they've got a better role, you expect it to be more upside, then I think you absolutely can. Probably depends as well what salary, what cards have you got available for him too, and the others. So, I think you absolutely can, given that role, until we see a bit of a change and some more midfield time.
Yeah.
He's not putting
just don't like the half-forward role, and his last two scores have not been great, 68 and 71. So can't be relying on that if you're going to win under 22s. It's a very tough competition to get to the top of the leaderboard. And every point really does count, I think, because the number of players that we can choose from is a lot less than we can choose from in the standard competitions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that midfield line too in 22s, you won't be burned as much, I don't think. Like the midfielders haven't actually been putting up a huge amount of scores. Like even if you look at last week, really the top performers, there actually weren't many in that midfield line. So my notes here, I wrote Hugo Garcia was a top performer with 128, and then I just wrote the rest struggle. Like I think in that midfield line, that's the spot where you probably can. So I don't mind it at all. Mate, we'll move on to the rucks as well. We'll probably go a bit quicker through these guys in particular because I think there's a few clear options and a couple of things to be aware of. So the big thing, Tristan Sherry, he's still out. We've obviously got Tim English there as a point of difference because he's likely going to be coming back after having 1 week out with a potential MCL, and he's got a good matchup here against the Cats. So he's going to be a point of difference. But I think we're sort of going two of those three options at the top. Gawn, Grundy, or Jackson. We have the ruck goat, the ruck pig, and the ruck unicorn. Which combination are you going for?
At the moment, it's Grundy and Jackson for me, but I feel like I just can't fade Max Gawn. So I'm probably gonna have to just drop Luke Jackson and just get Max Gawn in. I think I don't want to do it, and then see Gawn at 320 on Sunday, go 150, and then just be counting Luke Jackson's handballs and in the late game on Sunday night. So for me, I think I'm just gonna have to go with Gawn and Grundy. Because I think Grundy is, for me, clearly the number one this week. The matchup against Madden, we don't have a lot of data, but I do think it's one that he can definitely target. And he's obviously gone 142 and 155 in his last 2 games. Plus, he is awesome at the SCG. It's easily his highest averaging ground of anywhere that he plays. So I think Grundy is a clear number one. And then for me, it's a toss-up between Gawn and Jackson. We know Jackson's got the matchup against Bailey Williams and Duff Tytler. perhaps a little bit of mid-time. There's Mason Cox probably comes in to replace Sean Darcy. How much of a split does he get?
Yeah.
Low kick to handball ratio. Normally he does handball it a bit more than he kicks it. But he has put up 139 and 140 with 3 sort of middling scores in between. So maybe he's the one that we just take out for Gawn, who has been scoring a lot bigger and has put up 139 against Wits, 145 against De Koning and Marshall, but does have Darcy Fort, who's a fairly restrictive ruck opponent.
Yeah, it's the addition of Mason Cox for me that I don't love. I think I'll spend more time thinking about a Luke Jackson if I see that, if they're going to roll with that solo ruck in Luke Jackson, because last week when Sean Darcy went down, we had Luke Jackson have that season high in terms of centre bounce attendances and ruck contests, so both at 81%, and that reflected in his GDS score of 139. So, even with that, we still have Gawn and Grundy that can go higher. So if they've got Mason Cox coming in and he's not getting that sort of market share or attending those ruck contests, for me, he's just not an option. He probably will still put up a good score against West Coast, but it's just, as you said, it's just so hard to avoid a Max Gawn and or a Brodie Grundy. So yeah, I think I'll look at it if Mason Cox is out. If he's in, I'm not going there. And Gawny, I know we've talked about Brisbane. They're typically a restrictive matchup for rucks, but his last 2 against them?
No, what is it? Pretty big, though. I'm pretty sure he's had like a 200 or something there, right?
Close, yeah. 166 and 182. Yeah. I can't fade him. I can't fade Grundy. I think you can absolutely play a Luke Jackson if you've got like an all-star and you want to play that in a classic or a challenger. Go for it. I think, we talked about those all-star cards, like the weeks you don't play them, you just kick yourself and go, I probably should have. So yeah, I think if you've got a card like that, you can absolutely play a Luke Jackson. Like, I think he'll still be good. I just feel like there's more ceiling in these other 2 because they have the number 1 ruck roll, whereas Luke Jackson doesn't. But wait and see. We'll look at what teams does there for us. And Jonathan's put in the chat there too. Thanks, Jonathan, mate. Good to have you there in the chat as well. English is officially ruled out. So he is no longer a point of difference. Do not play him in your squads.
Don't do it.
Absolutely. Now we've got Darcy Cameron there as a point of difference. We saw a slight role shift there last week with Oscar Sedin as well. So Darcy Cameron had more of that number 1 ruck role, and he put up a really good score last week for the Pies as well. And they come up against the Blues, who are a pretty easy matchup. So you might look at a point of difference, but I really don't think we are. I think it's probably Gawn, Grundy, Jackson.
Yeah, I think so. And then obviously you've got Wits there as the avoid. I mean, I know he's playing Blackiston, but I still can't really see anyone outscoring the top 3 there.
Nah, neither do I. And I think it might even be Peter Wright too, potentially. He did a bit more of the ruck duties last week as well. But yeah, if you are targeting that matchup or you look at it, probably don't. I'd probably stick to one of those 3 at the top there in particular. And yeah, obviously Nick Madden, our under 22 player watch. I played him in 22s and Sunday last week, so I was very happy with that decision.
Big winner.
Yeah, I was even trying to source a Bailey Williams beforehand, but I didn't even realise he was a forward. He's forward eligible. He's not ruck. Yeah. So that's why I couldn't find him. I was looking in the rucks, and I should have been looking for a forward. But jumping on there, mate, we'll move across to those forwards now because there's probably a couple more options there to look at. Our plug and plays we've got on screen. Harry Sheasel, Brian Myers. He's obviously been down in those last couple of weeks, but I think he's still a play. Cozzy Pickett, Sam Flanders, and Josh Rochelle. So we know how good those guys are, and I think he can play them. Sam Flanders will probably hoping for more in that last game, and they come up against Adelaide this week. The thing is, though, if you go back and look at how he scored against Adelaide, he has absolutely killed it in every single game for a while. So they are actually quite a good matchup for him. So, yeah, I still like a Sammy Flanders this week, and he's still pretty consistent and reliable for us. So who else are you turning to, Roscoe?
I do have a slight concern with Graham Myers. I mean, his scoring's been down, but I feel like we just have to back him in. They get back to GMHBA, in a game that I think they probably would have the number if the Dogs are undermanned when teams come out. I think they probably, get the number on them. Graham Myers has shown that he can put up scoring very quickly in a quarter. I think it was Easter Monday against the Hawks. He was on 30. And he managed to scrape his way all the way up to a 90 or so. So we know he can score. We just need to see him return back to his best. I think I'll still probably end up picking him. Although if there was a plug and play that I was maybe apprehensive about, it would be him. The other one I am a little bit apprehensive about is Petrarca. Now, coming off a hamstring injury is always an interesting one for GameDay Squad. I mean, it's Petrarca, and he's come back from nearly a career-threatening injury before, so maybe a hammy's not so bad for him. His scoring has been absolutely huge to start the season, and he was on 77 before he did get injured. Playing Essendon, which is a great matchup again for an inside midfielder. Everything seems to tick the boxes. It's just the injury factor that does concern me a little bit.
So is he in or out at the moment? For
he's in, but at low rarity. So for classic Contender, I think just bronzes at the moment, just in case something does go wrong. But then I think
it's probably not even. Yeah, it's probably not even a case of going wrong, but just being managed. Particularly if they're up. If they're winning pretty convincingly, they might even have him, rested a little bit more, or maybe resting forward of the ball, off the ground. Like that might be the only little flag there. Obviously, the injury concern, like you said there too, but that's probably the thing that might happen. But I think what he's shown us so far this year, it's very hard to leave him out. I'm pretty happy to go there myself, but like you said, probably low rarity at this stage.
Yeah, for sure.
And Isaac Rankin, what did you think of him last week? Because he hasn't shown much this season, and then he has, and even has sort of mentioned this too, talking to me about it. Very rocky start to the season, but he actually then bounced back with quite a good score last week. So he had 131 GDS points. But the thing for us we really liked is his time on ground bumped up to 90%, and he attended 9 CBAs, which is 27%. So that was the really good tick I saw, and something Matthew Nick spoke about. He had a smile on his face. He was happy. He looked really good again. I think he could be a bit of an option this week. Have you thought much about an Isaac Rankin? Like I'm struggling to fit him in a lot of squads.
No, look, I actually really like it. I mean, especially if, unfortunately, that Jordan Dawson is out. I did watch the game versus Carlton last week very closely. He got to 131, and I think they were sort of willing to have him around the ball a lot more, which sort of led to that 131. And I think, if Dawson's not there, then a big percentage of the share comes in. Rochelle will be there, Sam Berry will be there, Peatling will probably be there. But then I think Rankin is probably one of the main 4 or 5 that has to go in there. And I think that can really help him. I mean, St Kilda, for inside midfielders, I believe, are a pretty neutral, maybe slightly negative matchup. So that's a slight dampener. But at home, I think, it's the kind of game that Rankin will try and drag the Crows over the line. And, even though from a fantasy sense, my Saints are maybe a bit restrictive, I think the Crows might just beat us this weekend, and Rankin can be really good and show, a good score.
So is there room for a Rochelle and a Rankin in the forward line? Because that doesn't feel right for me. Like I kind of want to see it again and see, like, yes, they both scored well together. But do you think we can be plugging them both in?
Yeah, look, I think if you're that confident that they're both going to play substantive midfield time, then definitely. Although the forward line may be the trickiest line this week, there are a lot of options. And as I'm sure you can see there, Pitty, some of the comments coming through as well, there's a lot of different ways that people are really going. Janet's looking at Josh Tracy kicking a big bag against the Eagles. When he's done that, he's gone 130 plus. I've missed him twice this season. We've got Zach Bailey, who playing against the D's probably still gets a little bit of midfield time. Scored really, really well so far this season, 118, 133 in his last 2. Still strong scoring despite not really having much midfield time, and he is playing for that sort of big contract, in terms of a footy sense as well. The other one I think that could be up there that we haven't touched on as a genuine option is Justin McInerney against the Giants. I think no Goulden means he's really stepped up as a midfielder. And I've really liked the look of what he's been doing in our forward lines. Really consistent, hasn't really had a bad floor game so far. So I think Justin McInerney is another option we can consider.
Yeah, 100%. There's heaps, and I think all of the players we're talking about, mate, they're all genuine. Like you can play them for sure. The thing with Josh Tracy, so someone put in here as well. So yes, there's Josh Tracy, Corey Blackledge. So any Murphy Reid love, I actually probably like a Murphy Reid over a Josh Tracy this week in particular. He's such a good player. Like he is so clean, and he just finds a way to score in these games. He hasn't really shown a ceiling just yet. Maybe it's because he's still developing as a player, but he could be a pretty reliable pick, I think, in your forward line. Josh Tracy's the ceiling play. If you want a ceiling play, go your Josh Tracy.
Yeah.
The only reason why I don't have him as high this week personally is the West Coast matchup hasn't been as fruitful for him in the past. He has kicked, where are we? He had 2 games against them. So 2025 round 3 and 2024 round 20. Kicked 3 goals in each of those for scores of 81.
Okay.
So he didn't actually get above a ton. And his last game against them last year, round 20, 48 GDS points. He's got an average in his last 4 of 73 GDS points against the Eagles. So I think that the form he's in now, he's much better as a player than what he was in the past 2 years. So if you want to go there, I think absolutely, because he's got the ceiling and he's shown he can do it. His marking is incredible. But I backed in Jezza last week and he only managed the 100 and he kicked a couple goals in that. So I was really disappointed. But in saying that, I think this is a very different game in a very different context. I just wonder, I don't think there is easy a beat a team as what they have been in the previous years. And I think there'll be a bit of heat in this contest. And Ruben Jinby's been, getting into those key forwards. So for me, I think he can go there purely for that ceiling alone and how good a form he's in, but he's just not as high up in my list for those particular reasons. And I like a Murphy Reid.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know about Murphy Reid in standards. I think he'll definitely be there in under 22s for me, though.
Yeah,
100%.
Connor McDonald, TCB. He's got him on screen. I know you mentioned him to me. I think he's been so good to start this year as well, and he's going to be an option as well. But have you got any thoughts around him? Because I know you mentioned him.
These Hawks boys are becoming really, really hard to split at the moment. Obviously, we've got Ginnivan there as a point of difference, and we've got Moore as well, who hasn't really been mentioned. I think the matchup for them against Port Adelaide at Marvel, it just seems like a game where they can score really well. Now, the problem is we've only got 7 slots, and we've got 5 guys we're considering plug and plays. So how many of them can we truly fit in? I think the Hawks boys, especially Ginnivan, 133, 109, 86, 113. McDonald has gone very similarly to that as well. They're quite hard to split for me. I think McDonald with 19% CBAs, I think, is maybe a little bit of a safer option than Ginnivan, who's sort of been playing a bit more wing. Just getting a little bit of extra midfield time for McDonald. But I can't fault him, and I can't really fault Ginnivan either. It's just a matter of your personal preference, I think, and how well you rank them compared to some of the other options.
And I think that's the thing. I think that's the way we're picking our forward lines this week. Like, there's just so many options. And we put Jack Ginnivan on screen because I know I've talked about Connor McDonald a little bit to start this season. So, he's still an option. Dylan Moore, like you said. But Giddings averaging 108 for the season so far, and he's had a low score of 86. And there's been a couple games where I thought he was sort of quiet or on a really low score. And then it was Sam Mitchell that actually came out and said, I'm going to put him in spots so he gets busy. So I think Sam Mitchell's coaching style is actually quite good for a Jack Ginnivan as well. And he was just running around getting season highs in disposals and marks against the Dogs last week. And yes, it was against the Dogs. That's maybe a slight concern there potentially. But I just think that he's quite a good little pick there in our forward line. I'm maybe not going to go there this week just with the matchup personally, but in terms of what he's been doing, he's a genuine pod if you want to go there.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, there's another one too. Before we talk about our fade there, or our avoid, sorry, had a message come through just before we started too about big 2 meter Peter Wright, and could he be a bit of an option who's eligible as a forward in GameDay Squad? And I know Tommy was in the comments there as well earlier. I didn't get to highlight one of those comments there from Tom, just talking about how Isaac Heaney's in the hot list for AFL players. He's a top player there. But 2 meter Peter was his boy as well last year, I think, from memory. He used to play him a little bit, and he's got that number 1 rock roll after that changed last week from Lockie Blackiston. And I mentioned that the Suns give up a few points to opposition ruck. So in terms of another point of difference in your forward line, it could be a Peter Wright coming off a score of 130 against Max Gawn and the Demons, if you don't mind, now coming up against Witsy and the Suns. The only thing with that too is I wouldn't be surprised if Witsy gets dropped, just personally. I think he's been struggling to start this year, and I'm glad we flagged that last week. And there's every chance that, how they line up in the ruck, that changes this week again. So keep an eye on that. But 2 meter Peter, he's a bit of a point of difference. He's probably an out there one as well. And he's probably, I think there's a bit of risk involved with a big 2 meter Peter personally, and how I see that game panning out. But you could look at him given that ruck
Yeah,
role.
they did go 73% and 23% for Wright and Blackiston, respectively, in the ruck contest. And Peter Wright did get 130 last round, before that 82 and 94. So it's not the worst. I just don't know how I feel about having my classic Cups hopes sort of ride on the likes of Peter Wright in my forward line. I mean,
Yeah. And we've got so many options
yeah,
too, like we've just rattled off. Like you look at your plug and plays and then you add in a few others from that list we've got on screen or even a few from the comments and you've got a forward line there. So yeah, I think you can, but it's a bit of an interesting one,
yeah,
hey?
definitely. And same sort of goes for Toby Green, our avoid for the week. I think, against the Swans, tricky matchup. He has been playing midfield time, and he has been scoring pretty decently as well. Obviously, coming up against the Tigers last week was a good matchup for him with a 122. That was his season high, although before that, only a 114. The others had all been sort of sub 100. I think against the Swans, GWS is starting to get some real numbers back as well in terms of their talent. So maybe Toby Green sees a little bit of a regression to his scoring this week. Was that just sort of your thinking as well with it, Pitty?
Yeah, 100%. That's it. And as you said, like hardest matchup for his career. It's just one that I'm keen to avoid personally this week. And yeah, we'll probably look to play him again in another week in a bit more of a favourable matchup personally. So yeah, just with the number of options you could be looking at, I think he's one we maybe don't look at this week and just make it a little bit easier for ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. Then in terms of your prime time, I like Tom Papley as a prime time pod. Scoring's been there. Sheasel, of course, Sunday superstar. And
Yeah.
Cooper Trembath is one that I had locked out there in my under 22 forward line. I think coming up against Richmond and playing second ruck is actually really favourable for him. If he can kick a couple goals,
Yeah.
take a few marks around the ground, get a few hit outs, I think he can put in a pretty solid score for us in the forward line, where there aren't too many super amazing options every week as well. So I think I'm a bit more willing to be risk averse in the forward line than I would be, say, in the midfield.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on the same line of thinking as you there, mate. Now we'll jump across there as well into our contender teams for the week, Haz and I, and then we'll show our primetime edition team as well, our consensus team there. So looking at who we're sort of landing on, and again, we're prioritizing classic at the moment, and we're then sort of playing what rest of those salary cards we've got left over in contender as well. So I've got a few picks in there that I probably maybe don't have elsewhere. Like you'll see a Shea Bolton down there on mine, who's on the bench in that forward line. So he's one. If you're talking about a Murphy Reed or a Josh Tracy, I actually probably like a Shea Bolton over those guys. But like you said, with Hayden Young coming in
Yeah.
potentially, it's something that I'll have to have a think about because he had a season high 81% CBAs last week. It's been a clear, or sorry, yeah, season high 81% CBAs. It's a clear role shift for him. But the Eagles are his second favourite matchup for his career so far. So his last three, he's had scores of 102, 73, 126. And I just feel like Shea Bolton is that sort of player he is up and down. He plays on momentum. And I just think that if he's coming up against the Eagles, he could be sniffing a game here where he could go well. So I like a Shea Bolton over those other couple, like a Tracy and a Murphy Reed for this week. But in terms of those others there, mate, you can see we've got the couple Giants and the couple Saints there too. And I'm keen on a Nick Newman down back, and we've both got an Archie Roberts, and there's obviously Cal Wilkie there for Haz, sorry, not Hal,
Yep.
for Haz. So he likes a Cal Wilkie. I do as well. I think he's pretty solid. The only thing with a Cal Wilkie coming up against the Crows, they haven't been a great matchup for him in the past, and I think that he'll have to do a bit more defending than what he has done recently. I don't know if you'd probably be a good person to comment on this in terms of being a Saints supporter and watching him play, mate, but he's just one that I go, you can play, probably still going to be a good option, but I'm personally maybe going to pick him from next week.
Yeah. One of him and Silvani will play on both Phil Thorpe and Taylor Walker.
Yeah.
I think his score got greatly benefited last week by the fact that we struggled to actually move the ball up the ground. And I think if Adelaide do sort of get that on us again and we struggle to move the ball up the ground, he can score really well again, despite the restrictive nature of their matchup. Because, we sort of chip it long, chip it back, take lots of marks, bomb it up the line. And, Wilkie's normally that kind of guy who's doing that. So, that can be favourable for him in a sense. I think actually if we have a bit more of an open contest, it doesn't help him as much because he doesn't get that much cheap ball. So it'll be interesting to see how that sort of turns out.
Yeah, absolutely. In that midfield line there as well, you can see we've got a very similar midfield there, but have to look at someone to replace a Jordan Dawson. And we both like a Matty Rao there as well with that Essendon matchup. Grundy and Agorn, we aren't going to be looking at a Luke Jackson, but as I said, keeping an eye on teams, I might think about it more. And if you've got a Luke Jackson card and you are keen to play him, you still absolutely can. And then our forward line there as well. There's just so many different options you can go, I think. And yeah, good comment there in the chat from Ross. Absolutely there. A no to Bolton. He can drop a 70. He can. And that's why I haven't played him a couple of times this year. And the one time I was going to a few weeks ago, he put up a really good score. I've got a good feeling about him this weekend as well. I'm not going to go there in Classic. Probably not even in Challenger as well, but I think I'll throw the dart in Contender because I think he could go well this week against the Eagles, being his second favourite matchup. And yeah, that's just something I'm going to have a go at. But as we said, we've spoken about a lot of forwards. The other thing with those Hawks forwards as well that we haven't mentioned, so has sort of mentioned this in our notes as well, is just that Port Adelaide matchup for them too. I just saw that he'd mentioned this, that they're only allowing 59.4 GDS to opposition forwards this season, so ranking them as the second hardest matchup behind the Swans. But I guess you can look at that in a couple of ways. Hey, you can look at that in the fact that Connor McDonald does push up the ground a bit more than some of the other forwards, and so does Jack Ginnivan getting played behind the ball and through the midfield. So you probably still can go there, but it's interesting just flagging that little Port Adelaide data there for us too.
Yep, definitely.
All righty, mate. Our prime time team as well, our consensus team. Now, this is, again, all dependent on the cards we have. I do want to flag that too, because as you can see, there's a nice diamond Harry Mackay sitting down there. I probably don't recommend to play him, but I found the forwards hard to pick sort of down there this week. So I've got a Harry Mackay sitting there, but I don't love it. It's just because I've got his diamond. And there's a Sean Manor sitting there too. I'm going to throw that little dart there as well. But I found the forward line pretty hard to pick for that primetime competition. However, the back lines and the midfields and the rucks, obviously Tim English will have to come out now as well. It might be a Mark Pitternet. I'll have to have a look at that. But actually, to be fair, I'll probably go Darcy Cameron. And just back in that role's going to be the same as last week. But otherwise, that's kind of where we're landing there. And you can see our pod in the back line there, Lawson Humphries too. I'm pretty keen on playing him there in that primetime comp. So yeah, to anyone who hasn't got on board Stats Lab, make sure you do. They're, all the data we find in terms of difficulty of matchups and what they've scored in the past, that's all powered by the Stats Lab. So go check it out. They've got so much data available to everyone there. So absolutely highly recommend that for sure.
Definitely. The resources are really, really, really useful.
Yeah, unreal, hey? Especially when you're splitting hairs between a couple of players and you can just find something to differentiate.
Which I am.
Now, mate, how is this? We had our BroDown ShowDown Gather Round edition, and I was saying to Janet last week, has had the first pick for defenders, so he got Lockie Ash, and so I went, I'm going to back in James Sicily. Janet and I were both keen on him, and Sicily came out with the win. And then I overlooked Baz. I saw Jack Steele, and I got the stars in my eyes because I love a Jack Steele, and I forgot about Baz playing against the Eagles. So he took out the win there for Haz. But then in terms of that, it was a 3-1 victory to me. Yep. So I've taken a lead this season in the BroDown ShowDown, 4-2. I'm very happy with that. So I've got a 9-player combo pack that I will rip now. We've actually got to find out who is going to be winning that. So I had 5 people back me in last week. It was a massive landslide towards Haz last week. So Janet, Nate Daddies, Izzy, Mian, and Peter Quicksilver, they were the only people that backed me in last week. So one of those 5 are going to get this 9-player all-star common pack. And from next week, I'm going to go back to the 1 line for everyone. And then I'll have the other 2. But this week, I'll give away the full 9 players. So yeah, Izzy, well done, mate. All right, we'll jump across and we'll rip that pack. All-stars, they're all gone, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I feel like, someone
all sold out, so no all-stars. Yeah.
If there is an all-star in this pack, we're a little bit concerned.
Would be nice. Let's see how we go. Izzy, these are all yours, mate. So whatever I pull here, you can have. Hopefully there's something good. So a couple golds and a silver at the top. All right, let's see how we go. So we've got a Jake Riccardi silver to start off with. A Bailey Humphrey silver. That could be really handy this weekend. Potentially he's coming back into the side. Oh, Shawnee Manor. Ooh. Would you be tempted to play that, mate?
No, not for me. Oh, There you go.
Bang, how is that? Nick
Okie
Dacos
doke.
silver. Man, I shouldn't have said that because I've actually been struggling to get any Nick
Hugo
Dacoses in
Garcia,
terms of
another
in
relevant
packs. I've had
card.
to trade. Yeah, 22s, 128 last week. So he's a great little addition. This has been a great pack so far. Right, on to the goals. Evans from Gold Coast, Allen from the Eagles, Josh Gibcus from the Tigers, and a Bo Allen.
Oh,
Handy
Alan.
little dynasty, those last couple cards there as well. So that's a pretty good little pack there all in all. So easy, mate, they're all yours. And as I said, from next week, I'll start doing, because I'm sure I'll win again in the BroDown Showdown. I'm in form. And we'll do the one row and then I'll get the other two from then on. So enjoy those, mate. Hit me up in Discord, send me a message, and any of those / all of those will be yours. And I was also talking to Janeth last week about the BroDown Showdown edition. We're going to do a point of difference edition. I started this last week. I went for the pods last week, as you can see, or a pod. And this week we have gone under 10%. They must be under 10% played across standard competitions. We can only select from them. And instead of picking a ruck who is under 10%, we said, let's pick a utility so you can pick from any position, and they've got to be under 5% played across comps. So here's where we landed. In the back line, Haz has gone for Kitty Coleman, and I have gone for Nick Newman. So those two are up against each other. In the midfield, Haz has gone Matty Rowell, and I've gone Huey McCluggage. Forward line, he's gone Josh Tracy, hoping for a big game against the Eagles, and I have gone for Simpkin up against the Tigers. And obviously our utility, less than 5%, it's Humphreys up against Bodie Hewlin. So, mate, who are you thinking there? Like, to everyone watching and listening, get your comment in the chat. Who do you think is going to get up next week? This week for the Point of Difference BroDown Showdown edition. Drop Haz's name in the chat if you think it's Haz, or drop my name in there if you think it's going to be me. Roscoe, what are you thinking?
I'm a little bit worried by Hugh McCluggage and Matty Rowell, but other than that, I like your picks. So I'm going to take you. I'm going to back you in, Pitty.
Hey, thank you for that, mate. I'll write that down now. Janet did that last week and I got up. So hopefully that's the case there too. Yeah, I think I'll need it again, but I'm pretty confident with the picks I've got. So we'll see how we go. Nate Daddies has gone Haz. Again, thanks for getting involved there, Nate Daddies. And we've got TCB, Arnie Booger, Silver Pigeon. They've all gone for Haz. Rosso, he's on with me. Thanks you, mate. I appreciate that. And Coach Stephen as well. Thank you very much, mate. Thanks for getting behind me there. We'll see how we can go. I'm putting the scores up now because I'm confident I'm on the board. I'm happy with that. I was worried I was going to struggle against Haz because he's really good at these BroDown Showdowns. But we'll see how we go there, mate, and see if I can get another little win for us. All right, now let's finish up here as well. Thank you much for joining us here for tonight's show as well. I've really appreciated your time, and I know everyone's enjoyed your insights and the picks you brought to the table and helping me sort of unpack what's going to happen in round 6.
Yeah, no worries. Absolutely glad to be on. Love to be on again anytime. Love to have you guys on one of our episodes as well. I think that'd be really good to have. And you know, I think while this has been great, it has made it any easier for me to lock in squads before tomorrow night. So still got a lot of thinking to do.
Yeah, there's so many. It feels like the round 4, it doesn't. And I know there are a few comments in the chat about that as well, just about how hard it is going to be. Yeah, we'll have to see. We'll have to see how we go. But, mate, good luck for the cup as well. I hope you get up. Hope you get a win. And hopefully that we're all getting through again next week and see how far we can go. To all our new viewers as well, just make sure you've used that code there on screen, FBAR26. Get yourself those 3 9-player common packs. Get yourself started in GameDay Squad if you haven't already. To everyone watching and listening, thanks again for your time. We really appreciate it, as always. And we'll catch you next week to preview round 7. See you later.
Thanks, guys. See ya.